Well, good Sunday morning, and thank you for watching Beyond the Headlines. Well, raids carried out this week by the Texas Attorney General's office is targeting allegations of illegal voting harvesting. Caught up in that probe is Cecilia Castellano, the Democrat running for House District 80, which represents a portion of Webb County. Now, in court records reviewed by the Texas Tribune, the probe is reportedly looking into claims that a Frio County political operator had illegally harvested votes for multiple races in recent years. That includes this year's Democratic primary race of Cecilia Castellanos, whose cell phone was seized in the raid. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, his office claims that Manuel Medina, a former Bexar County Democratic Party chair and a chief of staff to State Representative Liz Campos, was recorded discussing a scheme with the political operator to collect votes for Castellano in exchange for compensation. During a search at Medina's home, agents took 65 cell phones and 41 computers, according to Medina's lawyer in a court filing. Castellano says she only met the woman once to drop off door-knocking materials, but was not aware of any meeting between Medina and the operator. Now, critics are calling the searches selective and a form of voter intimidation, with LULAC formally requesting the Department of Justice open a civil rights investigation into the incidents. In total, 6 homes were searched as part of the ongoing investigation. And with that, we're going to turn to our panel. That's where we're going to start off on this Sunday morning. Of course, we have Sergio Mora, a contributor, and we have Luis Villarreal, the general manager for KGNS. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good morning.
Wow, that was a bombshell when that came out this past week.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, more than anything is the excessive nature of the raids.
No. That's not more than anything. More than anything is the practice of harvesting votes and of all these illegal procedures.
Yeah,
we can't focus on how dramatic the
Let me give you some background. This investigation has been going on since 2022. Okay. There have been warrants issued before. Usually, a warrant is issued. They knock on your door and hey, we have a warrant to search. Come right in. You know. In Manuel Medina's case, they tore down his door with a battering ram, and like 13 agents stormed in tactical gear with assault rifles. At 6 in the morning, he has 2 daughters, 10 and 8 or something like that. They first pointed at his wife, then at him, then made them stand outside while they ransacked his house for like 7 hours. Cecilia Castellano didn't get the same treatment, but they still woke her up like at 6 in the morning, and they searched her house as well. Now, this race is very important because it's been a Democrat for seat for a long time.
This is Tracy King's
Tracy King's district.
Right.
It's leaned Republican, though, in the last 2 elections where Trump and Abbott competed. They won that district by like 3 or 4 or 5 points. So it's flippable. So this comes like really right after the runoff and 2 months before the actual election itself. And obviously this, like, if you look at the facts, they're like, okay, like agents raided this guy's house. They took 40 cell phones and 40 computers. That sounds sketchy, but actually, if you're in the campaign managing business, that's the typical equipment you need to run a campaign call center.
You had 40 cell phones and 40 computers?
I have worked in campaigns where that's just common. Like, okay, we're going to be, like, you access the database.
Because they use them for the phone banks.
You access the database on the laptop, and that's where you get the name of the voters and the phone number.
And you're doing the phone banking.
You're doing all of the telemarketing.
It's a call center.
The get out the vote, exactly.
So the thing is this, it's like, okay, why the excessive and bombastic nature of the raids? Now, let's talk about the ballot harvesting. It's been an issue, but there's a fine line between party activists, campaign workers, saying, okay, these elderly people, they can't make it to the polls. We're going to assist them in filling out the mail ballots.
Okay.
Now, the fine line is like, are you doing it voluntarily or were you paid for it? Number one. Number two, there's been legislation specifically when Donald Trump started saying the election was stolen, that led to many Republican-led states like Texas instituting really, really strict measures, scaling back even the non-compensation receiving, helping people with a mail-in ballots. So it's obviously an issue. I mean, if there is evidence to justify, like, hey, these guys might be acting improperly in that regard. But even then, if they were to be found guilty, it's like a $10,000 fine and 180 days in jail top penalty. It's not Like, they raided his house like he was trafficking cocaine from Colombia.
I'm not defending.
This was Ken Paxton, impeached Ken Paxton.
Clearly excessive.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing that, Sergio. I mean, I think clearly it was a show of force to intimidate or whatever.
Thank you.
Got it.
Thank you.
Got it.
Simple.
No, but the simple thing is that there's still an illegal action that is being investigated and taking place, and it should be punishable for whatever it is. I don't care if it's 10,000 or 180, because there are, I mean, we live in a day and age where we have to make sure that the electorate is confident that everything is being done properly. So, two different issues, but I don't think either one trumps one or the other. I think we're dealing with two. You cannot use the fact that there was the use of excessive force to forget what the alleged crime is or the alleged illegal activity is. I think they're two different issues.
Yeah, but if you're talking, I mean, how long does it take for these investigations to usually take their course? This supposedly action happened a couple of months ago. Yeah. And so they acted, Ken Paxton acted really quick with his little unit, the election integrity unit. You have to look at the optics of the race itself. Like if LULAC and if they hadn't been quick to exactly allege, like, hey man, this seems like it's done more for political gain, for political theater, than actually going through the proper motions of an investigation. And I mean, these are people that are very skilled, obviously, in getting political gain from their actions. I mean, it's Ken Paxton. This was the guy who was impeached by the Republican House of Representatives, only to be acquitted by the Senate. The thing is this: like, these legislations were very unpopular because if you hamper the ability
unpopular with people who don't really care about election integrity.
No, because if you say voter fraud, and there's no real instance of voter fraud, but you use Trump's allegations of voter fraud to institute laws that are going to make it very difficult for people who rely on mail-in ballots to vote, then you're actually decreasing the voter participation of the most vulnerable.
But Sergio, you know very well, you've been in this for a long time, and you've been involved in this stuff for a long time, and you know that there are shady practices that take place on both sides of that, okay? And so, again, my problem is not, I don't have an argument against you're correct. I mean, there should be some civility and some proper way of doing things, and I'm not even going to go over the theater argument or whatever, but at the end of the day, we cannot shift the focus onto that when we know that there is an underlying problem with election integrity when it comes to shady practices. And in our community here, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, in our community, I mean, we've all been exposed to the shadiness of what goes on. Nothing illegal.
I've said it before that people boast about their mail-in ballot operations and that they got this person
and the change of address or lack of change of address.
And the renting of 25 minivans from Mexico to come in and bring.
But this and the Texas Tribune talks about. The Texas Tribune talks about cases in the Valley and Mission, like with a mayor's race. They talk about this lady that in 2022 participated in a county judge race that was really contentious. In none of those instances
did they break down a house.
Yeah,
but you're going back. Okay, I get you. But that's not the biggest point of this thing.
No, the biggest point is if you really are targeting that district for your party, and you have the means to just really humiliate these people.
But how does it affect the race at the end of the day? Do you think people are going to say, "Oh my God, these are criminals. I'm not going to vote for them anymore"?
I think absolutely. I think you see a huge raid like this, just a regular person who doesn't understand the makings of politics and what goes on behind politics, you assume the person's guilty. Because how often do we say, oh, no, that was done incorrectly, that person's really innocent. That's not human nature. Human nature is like, oh my God, they must have done something wrong.
I just wish both of you,
you're very wrong.
I just wish both of you would be as passionate about when this happens the other way, because if it's wrong on one side, it's wrong on both sides.
Of course, man.
And these show of forces that, and these raids happen at all levels, and when there's...
Not this kind of raid.
Oh, yes, they have.
And when they're being spearheaded by...
bank robber, man.
No. White collar
he wasn't
crimes.
resisting arrest, man.
Well, but when
But
is
it's
Ken
happened
Paxton ever
before.
going to do a raid like this against a Republican? I mean,
of
you're never going to see
course.
I understand that,
you
but
know.
the same can be said the other way around,
It's like
too.
okay.
It's
If
not
we
just
had
Ken Paxton is not the only one that has done this, and this is not the first situation. And so again, we are very selective in how we treat these instances. When
No, he's very selective when
right
choosing
thing
who
to
to raid
do-
with a battery.
The
No,
right
and
thing to do,
that's-
my esteemed friends here, the right thing to do is to call this out whenever it happens, regardless of whether it's a Republican district attorney general or a Democrat attorney general. It is wrong both ways. And
Just apply the law
equally. And so we go back to the same thing that I've always said. We are still here sitting, fighting a battle for them, when our battle should be against both of them, not just one side.
No, I said from when we started talking, hey, if there's evidence of wrongdoing and if they prosecute and they're found guilty, ni modo, you know what I mean? But the thing is, you're using the process to affect the outcome of a political
and you're not fighting fairly. You're not fighting fairly.
It is wrong. But it is wrong on both sides. It's not just wrong when the Republicans do it, or it's not just wrong when the Democrats do it.
And
it is wrong when it gets done. Period.
But they have
their
due
totally
process, and they need their day in court, just like everybody.
I'm listening.
Just like everybody who's accused needs.
Are you not wearing this thing?
I lost it.
Oh, okay.
It's innocent.
Well, they're telling us we have to go.
Okay. Everybody's innocent till proven guilty, and they deserve the same.
We agree. We totally agree. But this one was targeted.
Yes.
Okay, I get the last word. Okay, well, when we come back, thank you for your service, even if it means decades too late. The Webb County Veterans Museum project is revived, and we'll discuss the developments at last week's County Commissioners meeting. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. Well, after roughly 20 years of meetings, the Webb County Veterans Museum is at long last coming together, with renditions of the project being showcased before Commissioners Court last Monday. Now, Dr. Hector Farias, the great-great-grandson of Juan Francisco Farias, who donated the house for the museum, reflected on the long journey, saying that the Webb County Veterans Museum has been in the works for so long that many of those who had worked on it initially have now passed on. But the nearly two-century-old home will now be restored to honor the nation's heroes. Now, throughout the almost 2 decades, the project has seen changes not only in leadership, but also in vision. Webb County Commissioner Ricky Jaime inherited the project when he came into office back in 2022, and he explains the most recent change will unite the museum and the Veteran Services Department. Now, when we're going to start talking about that, I apologize, we're going to start talking about that. This has been an issue. So this started 20 years ago, just to give you all some perspective. I started with KGNS 20 years ago, so I was a little newbie here at the station when we started talking about wanting to build a Veterans Museum to pay homage to the veterans, rightly so. I'm celebrating my 20th anniversary this year. We still don't have a museum. Yeah,
they need a museum to cover like the efforts of building a museum. It's been so long that they've been in the works.
It's just mind-blowing that the creation of a museum that just seems like the right thing to do, because we need to pay tribute to our veterans. It just hasn't happened. It hasn't happened.
I think that there's been over the years a lot of infighting within the veterans organizations themselves, and then as new political leaders get voted into office, they want to take on the project and they want to take it in a completely different direction.
Different locations even.
Well, at one point they wanted to build it in North Central Park, and it was like, dude, come on, why are you building it in a park? A park's a park, and put a museum where a museum should go.
Separate places.
So I mean, I remember that the Farias home was
donated.
Was the first candidate for this. So hopefully.
And I remember way back then when it was first donated, the big issue back then was that it needed a lot of work. Obviously, it's a historical home, just built many years ago, and because of that, needs a big overhaul, and that was going to cost a whole lot of money. So that was when they started looking at other locations. And then that created infighting among veterans, those that were in support of the Farias home, those who weren't in support of it, and all the infighting just prolongs and prolongs and prolongs, which just is the same thing for many things. You know, you fight about issues and the fighting continues, and at the end of the day, nothing happens.
You know, and it's unfortunate, and again, you know, we can't get away from the fact that good causes and good projects get hijacked by special interests.
Exactly.
And
for political
gain.
Right.
All politicians on both sides, again, or three sides or four sides. So again, it makes me, you know, go back to the whole, you know, let's pay attention to all of them, not just half of them or 2/3 of them.
Yeah.
Because that is a common practice, and it's sad that a project like this, which is completely valid and completely needed, and that can get hijacked in such a way that here we are 20 years later. Imagine the cost difference between doing this 20 years ago and doing it now.
Exactly.
Just think about that. And I know that there's more money been added to the project now or whatever.
But you're absolutely right, because we know that obviously the cost, like you said, of materials 20 years ago versus now, everything raised in prices after COVID, the shortages of materials. Now we're going to end up paying so much more for something that wouldn't have cost as much. But the sad, like you said, Luis, the sad thing is that it's a good project, a veterans project that fell to the wayside because of politics.
Special interest in politics.
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely, and
you
so
know,
not fair.
I mean, it's not fair that like when it was envisioned, it was with certain veterans in mind, and now they've, like they said, they've passed on. There's been 2 wars since, another whole batch of veterans. I mean, so it's time.
We're going to need to expand the museum to cover
more exhibits.
some more exhibits.
Yeah,
exactly.
But like Luis was saying, I mean, politicians, like with veterans, it's always the case. Like they love to just be associated.
You tell
veterans.
a feel-good story, and you want to be part of that because
it's like you wrap yourself in a flag,
right?
When you push veterans issues.
And we put our interests to get ahead of what the cause is. You know,
Right.
and we all should recognize, and we should all honor these veterans. It shouldn't matter who built it or where or
correct.
I mean, it should just anyway. But it's just another one of those examples.
Yeah. So will it happen? What do you guys think? Will it happen? Will shovels hit dirt this year?
I cannot bet on this one. I just can't. 20 years of reporting on the Veterans Museum that has yet to come about, yet to come to fruition. This is just not a bet that I'm willing to make, because I will see it when I believe, or I will believe it when I see it.
The Veterans Museum and the water park are two...
yes.
Maybe they can combine them. A veterans water park.
I like that. I like that.
Maybe then it'll come about. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That is another issue that we have spoken about for decades. We can't even say that these issues have been spoken about over the last few years. It's been decades, and they still don't come about. So
hopefully it happens.
Hopefully this administration of county and city will finally make it happen, and for the veterans. They deserve it.
Most definitely.
Absolutely. Well, when we come back, we take a look at the one thing that our panelists cannot stop thinking about. Stay with us.
Bing.
Okay, we're going to start with Sergio, your one thing.
I read a really great book recently. This is by one of my favorite journalists, Fareed Zakaria. And it's called Age of Revolutions, Progress and Backlash from 1600 to the Present. And it talks basically about how in periods of intense progress and technological change, inevitably there's a backlash of the people that got left behind, of the people that felt that it passed them by. And it talks about the industrial revolutions when everybody moved to the cities. And recently it talks about the liberal and illiberal revolutions, when globalization, when manufacturing went all over the world, a lot of people lost their manufacturing jobs, that is like sort of like the base for these populist, autocratic uprisings where they're proposing isolationism, like China's cheating us, the elites are cheating us. And it's because these are the people that really got left behind when globalization took off in the last couple of decades. Then he finishes, obviously, with the new era of artificial intelligence and what that means.
Well, we can't read the book anymore. That was a spoiler alert.
I highly recommend.
No,
I
just
gave
kidding.
you a very rough outline. But if you want to understand like the world as it is right now, the political parties, the liberalism, conservatism, I highly recommend you check out this great book.
Sounds good. Thank you,
Speaking
Sergio.
of being left behind, so there's this brouhaha going on about this band that is reuniting. Do we have anything on it?
Oasis.
So I don't know who these people are.
They're humongous, man.
I didn't know them when they were a thing. I did not know who they are. I'd never heard their name before. I don't know how.
It's Wonderwall.
I don't know what that is. And so there's all
Wonderwall.
this, reunion and all these things. Like, who are these? The Beatles? I mean, I have no clue who these people are. And I'm wondering, was I asleep in the 90s? I don't know.
You might have been, man.
Do you know who they are?
Of course. It's Liam and Noel Gallagher, man. They got in a fight like 20 years ago. And they finally
they are
made
an
up.
older band, but they do have a couple of.
I know older bands. I don't know them. And I don't know where I was when this took
You were
place.
asleep.
Was I asleep? How long were they a thing for?
They were for a while, man.
Yeah.
They were huge.
Really?
Yeah, they were one of the biggest rock groups
Okay,
in history.
give me a contemporary band around the same time.
Around the same time from
Give me
how
somebody
many years
else.
ago? About 10
Who
years
was
ago.
was around?
I mean,
Matchbox
Dr.
20.
Dre
Okay.
was around.
I know
around
Matchbox
the
20.
Matchbox 20. Yeah, so.
Dr. Dre, Eminem.
Yeah, they
like
just
all
kind of fell through the
those.
cracks. And I don't think they had, I mean, I only know a few of their songs, but they were a really good band.
Interesting.
And they have a huge following, humongous following.
Yeah.
A friend
And
of
it's
mine
two
loves
brothers.
it, and he doesn't shut up about it.
Good.
Okie doke. Well, my one thing isn't as lighthearted at that, but it is something that's very special and near and dear to all of our hearts. Today, the show is airing on September 1st, so this is the month that recognizes World Suicide Awareness and Prevention. So the month of September, we're going to start seeing a lot of organizations come out hosting events to bring awareness to suicide. You are not alone. 988 is the number to call if you do feel like you or someone you know or love is in a suicide or crisis situation. So just remember 988, and September being the month to bring awareness to this very important subject. So also Tuesday, September 10th, write that date down from 5:30 to 7:30 at the public library. They'll be hosting testimonials about suicide prevention. So I know I don't want to end the show on such a heavy note, but it is something that's very important. Okie doke. Well, that does it for us in this episode of Beyond the Headlines. Make sure to tune in next Sunday for another lively discussion as to what is going on in our community, in the state, and nationwide. Have a fantastic Sunday.
That was fun.